get so stuck in being so afraid of whatever it is, whether it's a difficult but necessary piece of criticism we need to give someone, or admitting something about ourselves, or having a conversation with our kids.
Welcome back to Happiness in Progress. I'm your host, Danielle Craig. I'm an Emmy Award winner, former journalist, mom, wife, and just a person looking for more joy in the everyday. This podcast is brought to you by the Mail Tribune. You can check out more podcasts by heading to mailtribune.com. This podcast is all about living a happier and better life, and part of that is living an honest life. Honesty impacts us every single day, whether we're being honest or dishonest. And so I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest, Judi Ketteler. She is an award-winning journalist who has written for several publications, including the New York Times, Good Housekeeping, Better Homes and Gardens, Runner's World, Self, Women's Health, and many more. She is the author of Would I Lie to You? The Amazing Power of Being Honest in a World That Lies. I really love the book and I love this conversation. I think you're going to take a lot from it. We talk about being honest in parenting. This might be an episode you don't want to listen to with your kids around. We talk about being honest in our romantic relationships and how that impacts us. We talk about doing some serious self-introspection where we're asking ourselves some tough questions about whether we are being honest in what we're doing. And of course, how this impacts our lives, how this makes us happier when we make the choice to telling the truth and when it's okay to lie. I know there's some of you that are going to listen to this just to find out when it's okay to lie. All right. I love the conversation, so let's get to it. I want to thank you so much for being here. I really love the book. And actually, several years ago, I had made a decision that I would tell no more lies. So as I'm reading this book, I'm thinking like, oh, I got this. I'm so good. I'm right there. And then my son, really angry, walks in and says, who spilled all my letters? And I knew he was looking for a fight with his little sister. And so I said, it was me. And then I'm like, it was me. Would I lie to you?
Right.
And I realized, oh, maybe I actually do have a little work to do. So I wonder, did you have a moment like that? You started an honesty journal in the beginning. Did you have a moment where you thought, wow, I'm not as honest as I thought I was?
Oh, I had so many moments. I mean, so many moments. And I still continue to have those moments. I mean, even after doing all the work, I still have these, I catch myself. I'm much better at catching myself now. But I still have plenty of times where, like you, like I go to reach for something that really isn't for the benefit of anyone else. It's really my own, to serve my own ego. And then I say, wait a minute, hold on. Maybe I'm not going to tell that lie. So yes, a ton of moments like that. Absolutely.
What was your biggest aha moment in your writing, your interviews, your research?
I think the biggest aha was this idea that I came to probably in the middle, about in the middle of writing the book, or maybe I think I was still working on the proposal at the time. It all kind of jumbles up. You have the proposal, you have the book, that this idea that all is not lost in the world. I was feeling so frustrated with with all of the dishonesty I was seeing around me. And this idea that does it even matter anymore? I mean, this is an idea that I've heard echoed in a lot of places, right? Does it even matter anymore? And I think I finally came to this, I guess I would call it an aha moment where I was like, yeah, it does still matter. All is not lost in the world as long as we are still trying to focus on honesty, as long as you are really being accountable to yourself. All is not lost. So that was a really powerful realization. But it also means that there was a lot of work to do. I also realized being accountable to yourself means that you have to put in the work, you have to put in the time, you have to notice, you can't just say it and then not do anything about it. You have to say it, all is not lost. I'm going to take responsibility for myself. I'm going to be accountable to myself. And then you have to actually do it.
And which is the hardest part of all.
Right.
What do you think is one of the biggest things that holds us back from being honest?
I think that we're so afraid of what it will feel like to be honest. At least this is true for me, because I'm not, I don't like confrontation.
Uh-huh.
I was the youngest child. I was raised to be not exactly the peacemaker, but kind of the person that's like, no, it's okay, everyone, let's get along. It's okay. Like, that's my personality. And so it's hard for me. It's scary for me to speak honestly about things and to confront situations. And so, the research shows, there's a wonderful study from Emma Levine and Taya Cohen that shows how much we mispredict what honesty will feel like. I talk about this in the book, that they had people for 3 days, like they split people into groups, but one group they had be honest in all of their interactions for 3 days. They said, be honest, be as honest as you can. And they asked them, what do you think will happen? How does this make you feel? And they were like, this is awful. Like, all of my relationships are going to be ruined. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be horrible. And then they came back after the 3 days and asked those people, and they almost all said that it was so much better than they thought. Like, they found these moments of meaning and connection, and it wasn't the awful thing that they thought it was going to be. So I think we really do. That's just one study, one example, but it rings very true for me that we really do mispredict what it will feel like. We get so stuck in being so afraid of whatever it is, whether it's a difficult but necessary piece of criticism we need to give someone, or admitting something about ourselves, or having a conversation with our kids about, when they ask you what a blowjob is, and you're like, why are you asking? I don't want, where did you hear that? Like, we freak out.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Right?
I have so many questions I want to ask just from what you just said, but I'll go off that because there's a list of questions your son asked you. And I think my jaw got to the ground by the time that I was done reading that list. But it was so powerful that he was coming to his mom instead of looking up on Google. Tell me a little bit about why that's such an important part of honesty.
Yeah. And so, I don't know if my kid is typical. Like, I don't know. He doesn't have a lot of shame or embarrassment around, asking sex questions, which I actually think is fantastic. I was very different as a kid. I never would have asked any of those things. But he is not like me. He just asks it. And I love that. And I don't know if it's typical or not, but I think it is so important, when we get those questions, even if we're not getting the questions, even if we're just like hearing the conversations the kids are having when they think we're not listening, like, if we don't give them honest answers, they're good. They are going to go look it up, they're going to get it from memes, right? That's what my son, like, I check his Instagram account and I see him following all these like really, really awful, I say awful just because they're 18 and over, like they're very mature meme accounts, and like delete them and block them. And that's where they're going to get their information from, right? If we don't give them these answers, either answers to questions they're asking, or like preemptively try to have these conversations with them, which is what a lot of parents may need to do if their kid doesn't just come up to them and ask them these questions.
You talk about, in that section of being honest with your children, you talk about being thoughtfully honest. Talk me through that.
Yeah. So I think that, kids, you don't need to tell them kids we need to be age appropriate, right? So that, that's one way to look. Also about, so the things that I used to just say offhand without even thinking about, like if the kids were, if they would see my husband and I fighting, which we're not big fighters, but sometimes we have tips about whatever, and they're like, Mom, are you guys going to get a divorce? Are you going to whatever? So I think I used to just say, like, why don't worry about that. Why would you, don't worry, whatever. And that's not a very satisfactory answer. And it's also really a missed chance to impart like some values, so now I say something more like, I don't think so. Dad and I love each other. We're really committed to being married, but you know what? Marriage is hard, and it kind of only works about half the time. It's not an easy thing. So, because I don't want them to judge their friends who have parents who are divorced, right? And so it's like this chance to say, like, we're committed to this. We're working hard on it, but it's not an easy thing. And, it doesn't always work out for everyone. And, I just think there's so many chances to be honest, but to also impart values. I don't know if that's kind of what you were getting at, or you may have been referring to another section.
No, I love that. And I also love that in that same breath in the book, you talk about, but if this is a kid who's crying themselves to sleep worried about divorce, then you're going to be thoughtful about the way you talk about it.
Right. They don't always need a lecture, right? Sometimes they just need reassurance. And I think some of it is knowing, if your kid is freaked out about, are we going to have World War III? Like, single moment has to be this lecture or this chant. Sometimes it really is just about like soothing the child who is sobbing and is terrified in the middle of the night. I mean, you have to know the difference.
Right. Let's talk about Santa, because I think most people wouldn't even consider that a lie. I think if you ask most people, they'd say, I'm not lying to my kids. This is part of the magic and this is the tradition, what I want to, pass along to my kid. What did you find as you were looking into that?
So I would have said the same thing. And I still am not sure, like it's still this very gray area. I would have said the same thing until my oldest was really upset. This is when I talk about this in the book. He was 8 and he was really upset because he didn't know if Santa was real or not. And it was like causing him a lot of angst. And he was trying to Google it. Is Santa real? And when he said to me, he said, is Santa real? And I was like, oh, why do you want to know? And he said, because I feel like you're lying to me. Like that was the moment that I was like, I mean, I had never even felt like a lie. Like I had never even thought of it at all as dishonest. It was just like this thing, like, yeah, Santa, sure. I mean, I remember having good memories of Santa as a kid, but I was also the youngest of 7 kids. So someone told me pretty young, and I don't remember thinking about it one way or the other, So when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I really actually am lying to him. I mean, I am. And then I went ahead and I told him the truth. And my daughter, I had a similar version of a conversation with her a few years later. So I think that if your kid, like if they love everything about Santa and it's fun for them and it's magical, and that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with it. But I do feel like if they want to engage with you at a level of reality, like they're out of the magic phase or the whatever, like they're coming to you at this level of like, I need to know if this is real. I do think it's very important to be honest with them in that moment versus thinking you have to keep the magic going because it's too hard for you to think about them growing up. I mean, I think I've seen that in some of my peers where they're like, oh, so-and-so doesn't, he or she still believes, and I want him to keep believing for as long as possible. And I'm always like, why? I mean, once they're done with it, they're done with it. Why do you want to keep them believing in something? So people have very strong opinions about it, though, like very, very strong opinions. And, I think that ultimately it's probably not as important as a lot of the other decisions we make about honesty and parenting, really.
Right. And I love that you are very intentional, thoughtful about your responses based on what your kids are asking for. They were asking for facts. They were asking for truth. They weren't asking you to join them in a world of make-believe when they were asking about Santa.
Right. You really, again, it's just kind of joining them where they are, but also making sure that you can see clear of your own. I think a lot of parents, it's hard to watch your children get older. I actually love watching my children get older. I mean, I'm not very nostalgic for like when they were toddlers. I actually think that was kind of horrible. So I love to see them getting older. But I think being able to recognize like, okay, is this me trying to keep them little? Like just being able to see that in yourself. Because I think that's a blind spot for some parents, not all. But.
Earlier, you talked about being afraid of what the response was going to be when you were honest. And I thought of your relationship and how you made this decision to be honest with your husband. You were having a lot of inner turmoil about an emotional affair you had, and that person was getting a divorce just to kind of catch people up. But then you make this decision to go be honest with your husband about this. Did you have fears about how that was going to turn out?
In that moment, I was so conflicted and distraught. Like I knew that I had to do something. So I still remember like coming back from that run and just being like, I can't hold this in anymore. I've got to just fess up everything. And it was so, I write in the book, it was such a freeing experience to finally just say it all. But then the moment I did, I like had this kind of regret, or kind of like, I think I compared it to like when you throw up, like you try to hold it in, you don't want to, you finally do. And it's like this wonderful relief. You're like, oh, you feel so much better for like 5 minutes. And then the awful feeling of nausea comes back. And that's kind of how it was. But honesty, one thing I came to realize about honesty is sometimes it has to settle a little bit. Like when you really do just spill something very powerful, you have to let it shake out and settle, which ultimately is what we did. And it led to having a great conversation and to kind of our way back to each other. But I had to sit through that unsettling feeling as it settled.
How important do you think that conversation was to you guys getting back to where you are now?
It was everything. Like I feel like had I not just kind of said to him, like, I don't know if I want to be married anymore. I feel like I'm supposed to be with this other person. Now he's getting divorced. I think this is my chance. Like really kind of horrible things. But had I not said that and just kept trying to mull it over and kept trying to just figure it out on my own, I don't think we would still be married. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I would be with the other man. Because I can see now so many reasons why that wasn't the right thing and why it wouldn't have worked out. And, but I don't think we would be together, because I think that I had to get everything out there. It was the only way to put everything back together.
Mm-hmm. So if someone's listening and they're finding themselves in a place where they haven't been honest with their partner, what's your advice?
Oh, yeah, that's tough, because so the thing about my husband is he's very understanding. I mean, he not all partners would have the reaction that he had. So I always get very nervous giving advice because I don't know what anyone's relationship looks like from the inside. The thing that one of the principles in the book that I get to is share. Actually, I have to read it to make sure I get it right. When you love someone, honesty is about sharing with a loving purpose. So I think if your intent is just to like unburden yourself, because you can't possibly, like you feel guilty and you just have to unburden yourself with something that you did, but really it doesn't have that much to do with the relationship. It's like you just feel like you have to confess it. I think so you have to ask yourself, is there a loving reason behind this? So for me, I had to be honest with my husband because I wanted us to figure it out. So I had this like thing that I wanted us to be able to work through it. And I knew the only way was to be honest about it. But I don't know that all honesty needs to be shared all the time in between, married couples. If there's not that kind of like, what is the loving reason? What is my goal in sharing this? If that makes sense or not.
I love that.
It's very tricky. Because all relationships are very different. They're all wired in their own way. And I don't think there is any one size fits all.
I mean, I don't think I would have responded as well as your husband.
No, I mean, he's one of my fears really is that readers are going to be like, I don't even believe this husband is real. Like you made him up. There's no way that so I like joke with my husband, Alan. I'm like, people are going to think you're not even a real person. He's like, well, I am. Because he does look at things in a different way, which is difficult sometimes, but also it's wonderful too.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I want to switch gears and I want to ask, when is it okay to lie? What did you find there?
So there's a whole category called prosocial lying, which sometimes we call white lies, but that's not exactly accurate because white lies can also be very self-serving, and a white lie we think of as very trivial, whereas prosocial lie is not necessarily trivial. So the range of prosocial lies is everything from, German citizens hiding Jewish people in their crawl spaces during Nazi Germany, when the soldiers came to the door, to, your best friend comes up to you and she's just bought a new purse and she's so excited and she's like, what do you think of it? And you don't like it. but what's the point in telling her you don't like it? Like she's already bought it. She's happy. She's just saying it to say it. She doesn't really need anything, your approval. So why would you feel the need to just be completely honest about your opinion? Everything from saving someone's life to your opinion is really not needed. That whole range. And so in there, what the research shows is that when you, like, we think lying bad, honesty good, like this is like we have these scripts, but then when you walk people through scenarios, they say, well, I mean, of course you had to lie there, like of course this is what the person needed, or this was to save a life, or so. In reality, we understand the nuance. We just still stick to this like lying bad, honesty good. But if we can get beyond that and really look at a situation, we see that deception is often the more moral choice. But we get so clouded in these things like lying is always wrong. It's not always wrong. In fact, being honest would be wrong in certain situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to read something from the book. Show off the cover again. I love the cover. It's called Would I Lie to You? Okay. Let's see. You were talking about the 2016 election. You're talking about everything that's going on. There's screaming. There's name calling.
Yeah.
And you say that you stepped back and it seemed all a little bit dishonest. And I want to quote this. I noticed that people were lashing out, calling Trump out for all kinds of dishonest and generally disgraceful behavior and practices, and rightfully so. Yet I also noticed that some of those same people seem to lack self-awareness about their own actions. I don't know how many times I heard my fellow liberals talk about all the hillbillies who voted for Trump, or how many times I witnessed my fellow feminists who positively exploded when people picked apart Hillary's physical appearance, insult every aspect of Trump's appearance. It's easy to hold a villain to standards you just assume you meet without really looking to see if you do. This is really powerful and difficult introspection. Tell me why you think it's important that we look at things that are difficult like this.
Well, because that's what the part you just read, that's the actor-observer bias, right? Where you just assume that you're this pillar of whatever, and you judge others much more harshly when in fact you're doing some of the same things. And it's very difficult. And I still catch myself. I still catch myself.
We're human. Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. But it kind of goes back to that, all is not lost. The way it's going to not be lost is that we have to not do the thing that we're demonizing in someone else. And it's so hard when there's so much, it feels like there's so much at stake, and it feels like you have the cause of justice on your side, which I do think that me and my fellow liberals have the cause of justice on our side. So it's so hard. But the danger is that if you just act in the same way that you're seeing, so like the meme that came out a week ago or whatever of Donald Trump, and like he looked horrible, like his face was orange and whatever. And of course I saw it and I was like, whatever. But I was also like, what's the point? Like, why? What's the point in sharing? Like, there's so many things to attack him for, like literally all of his policies and everything he says. Why do this? Because I hate when people do this about someone who is overweight, or someone who, I hate when I see those memes poking fun of someone in a vulnerable position. But then why do it at all? It's that, why do it at all then? And it's very hard. It's very hard, I know. But once you see it, you really see it. Once you see that kind of hypocrisy, you really see it a lot.
And we're going into another election season. We're in the election season. What do you think is something that people can start doing now to check themselves? And is this important that they check themselves for their own well-being?
Yeah, I think it's extremely important to check yourself, whether you're checking, your behavior, your own bias, whatever it is. Yes, because I think the danger, so there's a wonderful I think it was on MSNBC, Eddie, I'm not sure I'm going to say his last name right, Glaudy. He was saying it's so easy to to put everything on Trump. It's so easy to put all of the racial hatred, it's so easy to just put it all on him, but it's us. Like, this is us. We have created that. This is us. And so I think that having that moment of, I don't like what I'm seeing out in the world, but I'm going to start with me. I'll start with me. I think there is such power in that. It makes you feel better. Like, it makes you feel like you have a little bit of your own power back. And I think that there is also a ripple effect in doing that. So in focusing on honesty, like, all of my friends and family around me, they're kind of like, it's rubbed off on them. It's like, it's when you start doing this work, it really does rub off on the people around you. And so I think that there's a way to create a good ripple effect to kind of counteract like the bad ripple effect. But I'm an optimist. So that's kind of, I'm always going to believe, I'm always going to try to look for the silver lining and everything. But to get to the silver lining, like, you really have to like go deep inside yourself and really find all of those behaviors you're doing, all those biases that you hold, and be honest about them. Because if you're not, you're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Would you tell people to start with your first principle of being aware?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, the benefit when you're aware, like, this is why I wrote why I kept an honesty journal, is because when you write something down, you engage with it multiple times. The situation happens and you reflect on it. You're like, I want to write this in my honesty journal. And then you go to actually write it in your journal, and you write it, and then you reread it probably. And then you think about it again, so it's like you've engaged with the situation multiple times that before you wouldn't have noticed at all. So that kind of awareness really builds. So it really is just about being aware in whatever conversation you're having, being aware of what you're saying. And some things are just hyperbole. Like, we just say things, and that's okay. That's not the end of the world. I exaggerate all the time, but sometimes it matters. And like, catching, like, when does it matter? When is it just like some silly thing I'm saying? And when is there really like something about that matters? But you can't catch that if you're not even aware.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the honesty journal. I think that's a great place for people to start. And actually, my road to honesty really started when I was in college, and I was like, I am exaggerating so much that I cannot keep up with it. And I don't know, did I tell him it was 5 hours or him it was 7 and so that's when I was like, okay,
yeah,
we got to start telling the truth 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Okay. I wish I could talk to you the rest of the day, but I'm going to wind up with this last question. This podcast is about finding more joy and more happiness in the everyday life when it's good, bad, in between. What would be your number one tip to doing that?
I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning. And I know I keep saying this, but kind of embracing that, like, if you are feeling just like a victim of this dishonest world, if you're feeling really down about all of the dishonesty and everything you're seeing around you, just like having that moment where you just go quiet, turn it all off, and just like focus on yourself. Just having that moment where you just turn it all inward. And I don't know that it's like an immediate road to joy. For me, it is. I mean, for me, it's like, it definitely is a road to joy, but there's like work to be done on the way. But just like shutting down the chatter and just focusing on your own thoughts, choices, decisions. To me, that is, you still need to vote and protest and like do all of those things that you're doing. But I mean, in terms of like really trying to claim your power back in this dishonest world, you just have to start with yourself.
I love that. I think that's great advice. And I did want to tell everyone, there's so much in this book. It's about, there's also being honest with yourself, being honest with friendships, being honest, in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So many different things to read in this book. I had more questions, but I'm going to stick to 30-ish minutes and wrap it up. Judi, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was super fun to talk to you.
I hope you enjoyed hearing from Judi. Like I said, there is so much in the book that we did not touch. So if you want to check it out, I will link that in show notes, as well as different ways to keep in touch with Judi. And I want to thank you so much for being here on Happiness in Progress.